Good afternoon, I'm Mike, and today we're going to look at part two of the book, Crucial Influence by Grenny, Patterson, Maxfield, McMillan, and Switzler. We went over the first couple of chapters in previous videos, but this part two is actually not a chapter. It's just exclusive to itself a part two, which precedes the other chapters that explain what the 6 sources of influence are. Part two, the 6 sources of influence. The authors remind us that most of us have an influence bias. We might see someone doing something a certain way, and for example, they're not doing their job up to par, and maybe we think that they're being lazy. Oftentimes, we might derive our philosophy from thinking that people have a lack of motivation. But the reality is, it may be a lack of ability or a lack of awareness about the implications involved. For example, the authors give a couple examples here, but if someone were doing a task that involved sanitation or just cleanliness, and they're seen just sitting by and not really doing the job, so I'm going to say maybe they're lazy. I attribute the lack of motivation to their behavior. But to address that, I'm going to say, threatening almost that you've got to do this or else. That's the way I'm going to influence. And unfortunately, that's the way that many organizations may try to force influence. That's a very simple example, but they try to drive change using force. What the authors suggest is that we look at other sources, but one of those can be ability. And we should always look at whether a person is able to do something before just assuming that it's a lack of motivation. Instead of trying to have the quick fix to the problem, as I like this quote that H.L. Mencken said, "There is always a well-known solution to every human problem, neat, plausible, and wrong." So our assumptions, they're just quick to jump to something, it's probably going to be wrong. For behavior change and to improve results, we have to address more than just one thing. We can't just say it's lack of personal motivation, because there are other factors which result in very highly established habits. And if we just address the one factor and saying, let's motivate this person somehow, we're not looking at all those other factors that are deeply entrenched, and they have to be addressed in order for more sustainable change to happen. So as far as motivation, a person might say, can I do it, and will I be worth it? And whether they have the ability to do it. The authors mentioned that their research shows that most leaders overestimate the amount of motivation required in influencing change, and they underestimate the role that ability has. So instead of just assuming that it's a motivation problem, we should also look at whether it's an ability problem as well. People have the skills to do it. Do they feel they have the ability? And the real secret sauce in this book is this chart here, which I'll let you look at it yourself. But it shows the 6 factors in a nice chart showing how personal, social, and structural factors are related with motivation and ability. And it's a key graph that explains basically the rest of the book, where they go more in depth with each of these 6 factors. The authors do note as well that for every problem that needs to be addressed, we don't need to necessarily overdetermine change. We don't always have to address all the factors. There might be a need just to address a couple, and that would be enough. So definitely invite you to look at this book and consider, what is your personal philosophy for behavior change? Like most of us, do you feel it's right just to assume that it might be a motivation problem? Or is it worth broadening our perspective beyond that bias and thinking, well, let me just investigate this more and see what other factors might be influencing this behavior? And what is it that we can address to make that behavior change?